conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
And welcome, everybody, to another amazing day right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. This is going to be one where some of you may ruffle your feathers a bit. I'm going to talk about national politics, specifically about Thomas Massie today, and then I'm going to cover two as well. Nate Morse jumping into this Senate race officially. We'll be discussing that. That's probably all we'll really have time for, because I'm going to take a bit of a deep dive here. And you know what? I hope after we're done having this conversation today about Thomas Massie, especially this PAC launch, everything going on, I hope you still at least listen to the information I give on state politics, my main topic that I talk about, and at least listen to the information I'm giving you, even if you disagree with it. And it's truthfully hard for me. I don't really talk a lot about national political issues. Many of you know I have a more, obviously, a conservative viewpoint when it comes to how I view things, but also, frankly, when it comes to politics in general, I try to approach it when I'm giving you a little bit of commentary and background information, other than the fact that I am a conservative who wants less spending, a smaller government, less debt, those types of things. Outside of those things that I care a lot about, I try not to shade in any personal beliefs I may have on a specific individual. Some people I like, some people I don't like, and I try to play both sides as much as I can in giving the information, because I want you all to be able to make your own decisions. And so today I'm going to, my only bias is coming from that of a conservative who wants to see less spending. And I'm going to just give you the facts, and you can draw your own conclusions, because I'm going to be honest with you. I don't feel like going to the mat to defend every single one of the votes and decisions Thomas Massie has ever made, because frankly, I disagree with some of them. And if you find yourself agreeing with the politician 100% of the time, you need to take a moment of reflection on yourself and wonder if you really have any conclusions of your own, any beliefs of your own, or if you're just following who's ever most charismatic at the time. But I think most of you are intelligent individuals. You want to stay informed. That's why you listen to the show. And therefore, you're not going to be somebody who agrees with any politician 100% of the time. And you shouldn't agree with me 100% of the time. So I'm just going to dig into the Thomas Massie issue, because we have this PAC launching ads here, and I think it's probably, maybe it's accidental, but a little bit gross on their timing here, is the PAC launching these ads on the anniversary of Thomas Massie's wife's death. That's pretty ugly as far as it goes. Her 1 year anniversary, that's pretty ugly. But it probably wasn't on purpose. They probably aren't aware of it, but it's still kind of gross. Putting that to the side, though, just digging into the actual side of what's going on with this PAC. Why is it spinning up now? What's going on between Massie and Trump and everything else? Let me just explain some basic just facts for you all. First, Massie, truthfully, has always voted this way. So, and behave this way too. If we take the War Powers resolution he just filed recently here, dealing with the bombing of Iran by Massie, or bombing of Iran by Trump, and that was filed by Massie. If we just look historically for a moment at his voting record, literally the first year Massie was in office, he filed an amendment onto the Defense Authorization Act that would a War Powers resolution, basically a carbon copy of what he filed dealing with Trump against Obama to prevent Obama from bombing Egypt. He then co-sponsored Ro Khanna's War Power resolution against Biden bombing Yemen. So this isn't like a Trump thing. It's not like Massie has some sort of Trump derangement syndrome and he filed this War Powers Act because he hates Trump. Literally, Massie just hates when a president bombs another country without first Congress voting on it. And you can disagree with him on whether or not it's constitutional. I think the truth is probably somewhere in between. Quite frankly, at this point, so many presidents have bombed so many other countries that it's kind of hard to say that, oh, for the last 20, 30 years, we've been doing this, but that's really been unconstitutional, and we're finally going to have this argument now. The timing's bad. The conversation's not probably a great time to be having the conversation as far as that goes. But regardless, it isn't a new thought for Massie. And I think that's important to understand, because nobody had a problem when Massie was doing the exact same thing to Biden or Obama. And that is worth mentioning. That isn't new. And I'm seeing a lot of comments online of them saying, oh, where was Massie when it came to Biden? And where was Massie filing this when it came to Obama? No, he's just targeting Trump. I mean, that's just false. That's not true. He was filing these things under Obama and Biden, factually. But what this really is about, with this pack spinning and attacking at this moment in time, it is not by mistake that we are almost a full year from the primary election that would take place in order to remove Massie from office. A full year. This running of the ads has nothing to do with that. In fact, you can call me Nostradamus. I'm going to make a little bit of a prediction that they spend this money here now. They'll probably do a little bit of polling after they spend the money just to see if anything changes that much. If nothing changes in the polling, because they did a push poll and they found 52% of people when they did a push poll would be willing to vote for somebody else other than Massie. So that isn't just 52% saying they want to get rid of Massie. No. That's them saying they'd be willing to consider a candidate other than Massie if they were endorsed by Trump. And that was done in a push poll, which, for those of you who are unaware what push polls are, they use it's a way of shaping the question. You're trying to achieve a certain result. It's kind of like you're both polling and campaigning at the same time. And so when you're doing that kind of push polling, your results are going to be more skewed to what you want it to be anyways. And so really that actually isn't a very good outcome for somebody who's trying to be unseated here, especially because everybody in the district knows about the conflict, and only 52% of registered Republicans are saying that they would be willing to consider someone else. Not they would be voting for someone else, they'd be willing to. So you have to convert almost 100% of the people who right now say they'd be willing to into people who vote against Massie. And that's not necessarily a very easy thing to do. Now, granted, Massie also couldn't give up any ground. So they'll probably run these ads, see if it's moved a lot. If it hasn't moved, I guarantee you what you'll see, especially if the one big beautiful bill has either passed or changed, or Massie ends up voting yes for it, if it gets the changes in it that he needs to see, and it will return to the one big beautiful bill in the next segment because it's progressively getting worse with the Senate parliamentarian. But if we see that gone, I would not be surprised at all to see this PAC spending go away, and to see Trump not get involved in the Massie primary, or maybe even endorse Massie in 2026 like he did in prior primary elections. Because Massie isn't being targeted for necessarily being Massie. He's being targeted right now because when it comes to the one big beautiful bill, they literally cannot afford to lose any other votes. You see, and this is the confusion I think people are having when it comes to Massie, is they think something has changed. They think that he hates Trump and something's changed and he's never done this before, but he has. The problem these people are having is that Massie has never gotten attention for it before, because his one no vote was almost an aside, a sub-mention when you have over 30 Republicans in the majority. This is like the first time that there's been a Republican majority with a Republican president, but the majority is so small that when somebody like Massie votes no, if somebody else joins him, it becomes a really big problem to passing the Trump agenda, quote unquote. And I'm putting that in quotations, because at this point, I look at the one big beautiful bill and I don't see Trump's agenda. I see something else. So we'll be discussing that, the real reason PAC spending, all of that more after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. And you're back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider. Hopefully, you're still with me. Hopefully, I haven't upset you too much. In the last segment, we were discussing how the history of Massie voting on when it comes to the war powers. He's always done this, everything else. And now we've turned to the one big, beautiful bill because that's the real problem here. That's what Trump's really upset about, is because he believes he wants to pass, not believes he wants to pass this one big, beautiful bill. It's his key piece of legislation, and Massie voted no on it before. We'll go into why in a second. Voted no on it before, and he cannot afford to lose other votes. So they're trying to make an example out of Massie in order to scare more people in line, and they need to do it. Now, you'd think, well, it passed before without Massie's vote. Why are they worried about it now? Well, the bill's gone over to the Senate, and it's gotten progressively worse. And so now you have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and others are like, look, I'm a no vote on this bill now, which means it will not pass the House. And so that goes into, that's the concern here that Trump really has, is that I need everybody in line to vote for this bill. Now, why does Trump think, why can't the bill just change? Because that becomes the question. That's a question everybody has. I have some of it. I know the answer. But it's like, okay, so you're attacking Massie because essentially he views the bill as not conservative enough. And when we go into, and that's the other problem, when we go into what are they risking by running these PAC ads here in a bit, that'll be a part of the conversation, is how Massie is approaching these issues. It isn't like he's approaching them like a Liz Cheney or a rhino, quote unquote, a Republican in name only. The problem and the risk here and the issues is that Massie isn't approaching this bill saying, I don't want to pass it because it doesn't spend enough money. He's saying, look, it's spending us too much into debt, right? His argument about war powers has to do with constitutionality, not hate for Trump or, well, Iran's good people, like it may be for crazy people on the left. It's that, look, I just don't like us bombing any country without us voting on it first, right? And so putting that to the side, once again, because we have to revisit those issues when we talk about why this, I think, is a colossal mistake by Trump to be involved in this issue the way he is. So the question is, though, why don't they just change the bill to make it better? And this is where you can control an individual, because I think Trump wants the bill to be better. I mean, you saw the tiff he got into with Elon Musk and everything else, where Elon Musk was calling out the bill as bad. And Trump's issues with Elon were to do with more with him claiming he's on the Epstein's list and everything else. But his issues wasn't as much over whether or not the piece of legislation is good or not. I think Trump knows this is a bad bill. It's not very good. But he's been told by Johnson that this is the best we can get. And anybody who's ever spoken to their legislators has had this incredibly frustrating conversation. You'll see pieces of legislation that they're passing that are bad, or pieces of legislation that all comprised are bad, that they'll have good parts in it, but then they have a lot of bad parts in it. And we see this all the time. They'll couple in a funding for an example, is something the State House did. They put together funding for the Louisville Opera House theater program, giving them $1 million, which is something you might be against, with giving millions of dollars to the Attorney General to pay for body armor for police officers. And that would be something you're for. And they bundle bad things in with good things because they're trying to put everybody in a position where they have to vote for it. And so you'll run into this situation where you say, look, why can't we just pass this standalone piece of legislation? Why can't we do that? And the response you're going to get is so often is, well, there's members of the caucus who we can't do that. There's members of the caucus who are concerned about XYZ. There's members of the caucus that are concerned that they'll lose their seats if they end up voting for this. Now, they never tell you who those members are, what members of caucus are taking issue with this piece of legislation. They just use this weird group of legislators who you have no idea who they are that takes issue with the legislation being 100% perfect and conservative. And because they never tell you who they are, you can't attack them for it. It's almost like you start to wonder if it's not the person who's telling you, well, there's a group of people that doesn't want it to pass. Well, okay, well, if you're not willing to name names of who those people are, I'm going to start to assume it's you who takes issue with it. Are you the guy? That starts to be the question. But instead, what I believe's happened here is Johnson has gone to Trump, said, hey, look, this is the best piece of legislation we're going to be able to pass. And people like Massie and others will take issue with it, but we think this is the best we can pass. And so that's made Trump say, okay, if this is what you got, Johnson, I trust you. I'm going to turn around and then beat the people I need to beat into supporting this because I need to get this bill passed. But what if Johnson's lying? What if they could actually pass something better? But there are special interests and lobbyists and other groups that just don't want them to pass more. Because remember, the cycle of power here, the way Johnson holds on to power, the way these people in leadership hold on to power is they have these caucus campaign committees that can spend money in elections. And so if you want to be defended in a primary or in a general election in your purple district elections, and you can't raise millions yourself, you turn to the caucus campaign committee and they'll spend money for you as long as you vote the way they tell you to. And that's how they have power over individual members. But in order to get money into those accounts, in order to have those powers over other members, you have to get donors, aka investors, to put money into the account. In order to get investors to put money into the account, you have to do their bidding so they get their payoff, so they're willing to keep dumping the money. It's a simple cycle. So it may not be that there's actually members who have a problem with it. It could really be that there are lobbyists and special interest groups, the investors that dump money into the Republican caucus campaign committees that then give people like Johnson the power over the other members that take issue with it. And Johnson doesn't want his own power to be threatened, his own control over the caucus to be threatened. So he will tell Trump, this is the best we can do. There's this random group of people, I don't even know who it is, that take issue with this. This is the best we can do. And Trump, he doesn't know any better. It's not his fault. He's not dumb. He's not stupid. You can only operate with the information you're given. You cannot keep track of everything at all times yourself. There's hundreds of members of Congress. You have no idea what all their individual issues are and concerns are. And so therefore, they're going to go ahead and take Johnson at his word. He trusts Johnson. He's trying to establish a relationship with him. So he takes him at his word, and that's why this bill is the way that it is, even though it's really not that great. It gets done some of Trump's promises, but it really isn't fixing any of the systematic issues that the country has. And then that brings us to why people like Rand Paul and Massie take issues with this in the first place, and why members of the base take issues, and now Marjorie Taylor Greene are taking issues with the one big beautiful bill. And it has to do with this simple belief of people falling into one of two categories. Either you're a Republican who really believes that if something does not change right now, the country's going belly up, the country's going bankrupt. Or you fall into a category of Republican that doesn't believe that. Those are your only two options. Those are the two categories Republicans are falling into. Now, the problem is the latter category that doesn't really believe that if something doesn't drastically change the next 12 years is going belly up. They will pretend like they do, but they really don't believe it. And it makes a lot of sense why they really don't believe it. And it makes a lot of sense too why the older voters don't really believe it either. Because, of course, let's be honest, decisions made in the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s is what has led us to be in this fiscal position we're in now. And, of course, it was the older generation of voters that we have right now that was voting for these people to do these things that has led us to be in the position we're in now. They are clearly very comfortable with politicians who have no problem kicking the can down the road. But the younger generation is looking at the amount they're paying in taxes. They're looking at their lives so far. The 10 years they've been adult, the 20 years they've been an adult, saying this kind of has sucked. I'm spending more and more on taxes. I can't afford housing. Food's getting more expensive. And yet, nothing is getting better. something needs to change, and I don't understand how this country can keep paying the amount they are in debt and stay going. And we need to change it right now. That's the younger group of voters are kind of falling into that category. Now, of course, there's crossover. I'm not saying just because you're an older voter, you believe this, and younger voter, you believe that. There's crossover, but that's the categories. And so you have to ask yourself, what category do you fall in, but also what category does Massie fall in? Now, Massie literally created, invented a debt badge that he wears around Congress. If anything, Massie acts as almost the conscience of the Republican caucus. Sure, he may be Mr. No, and he may vote no on a bunch of things, but he acts as a conscience to remind all the Republicans what they should be, the base of their conservative beliefs, especially when it comes to smaller government, right? And so in that, acting and fulfilling that idea of consciousness, he literally wears a debt badge around Congress that spins, saying how many trillions of dollars America is on debt, and you just watch it going up like crazy. Literally built them, invented them himself to prove a point to them, so it would confront them and put it in their face. So clearly, Massie falls in the category that he really believes that if something doesn't change, this country is going belly up next 10 to 12 years. And if you really believe that, the one big beautiful bill is a problem. Because even people like Scott Bessent will admit that it is a 10-year plan, that this bill is a 10-year plan. When I hear the people who agree and disagree, I'll hear Rand Paul and then Scott Bessent come one after another on a podcast or shows. They're actually saying the same thing initially, but where Scott Bessent comes in is he says, well, but they're not looking at this over 10 years. Here's the problem. The people who are the types that wear debt badges and really believe the country's going belly up don't believe we have 10 years. This is it. This is our only chance. I'll go over to why they believe that. After this short break, you're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. And you're back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, continuing with our conversation about ultimately speaking and what this boils down to, whether and we've been talking about Massie and the PAC firing up and sending out those ads and doing it now specifically to try to get the big, beautiful bill passed because it's losing support, especially as the Senate parliamentarian is taking things out of it. And when we dig into, is this a good decision or not by Trump, it's hard for me to see how, at the end of the day, if your goal as Trump is to get the Trump agenda done, attacking Massie for being essentially conservative but inflexible. And I'll hear some people say, oh, well, he's ineffective and everything else. Well, you can't be both ineffective and worth spending millions of dollars against. You can't be both, okay? You're either effective and worth spending millions of dollars against, or you're not effective and you're not worth it. Those two are incongruent. All right, so just that doesn't really, and he gets things passed, just not with his name on it. And I know he talked about it recently on Theo Vaughn's episode and everything else, but that whole claim of, well, he doesn't get anything done, so let's replace him. Really, I've heard this about other legislators before at the state level and just legislators in general, and they're quote unquote not getting anything done is because, to everybody's point, they won't compromise with the establishment, also known as the deep state, and in order to compromise away their values. And because of that, the leadership and quote unquote deep state don't let them get anything done. And so there's something to understand here too. When it comes to people like the McConnells, the Lindsey Grahams, the Nikki Haley's, the Mike Pence's, kind of the Johnsons, this deep state Republicans that are not America first by any means and stretch of the imagination. When it comes to those individuals there's something very specific they want, and they want Trump's agenda to be stopped one way or the other. And a great way to stop his agenda is to either A, water it down so much like what they're doing with the big, beautiful bill, and convince Trump that this is the best he can get done, and then B, give him a Democrat House. And I tell you this much too, there's nothing the deep state wants more than to get rid of Thomas Massie. Anybody who knows the establishment here in Kentucky, so on and so forth, they can't think of something they're more excited about than the fact that they're going to get this opportunity to finally get rid of Thomas Massie, because they hate him. They hate him because, and this is part of the problem, he's too conservative. Essentially, he's too inflexible. I mean, even online, even the people who are attacking him, that's what they're claiming. Hey, look, you got to be a team player. You got to get on the team. You're being too inflexible. So they don't like it. They want to get rid of him. So the deep state's sitting here like, well, this is a win-win. How great. Because we definitely get rid of Massie, and we will at least, most likely, put a Democrat majority in the House because of these attacks on Massie. I'll get into that. And because of that, we'll end up getting to stop Trump's agenda. Because that's what they want. They want to stop it. And that's what's so frustrating, is seeing people fall for this trick that ends up stopping Trump's agenda. Because what happens here? Now, much the same way, and I know this is hard for people to accept, especially the older generation, because they don't understand the younger college-age kids. But in the same way that Democrat socialism, the AOC types and so on and so forth, are part of the Democrat ecosystem to attract in the young, especially female voters, that helps them be competitive. Trump won this last time around, and one of the reasons why he won was because he did so well with younger voters compared to the last time he ran, and actually young men especially. Those younger voters, especially young men, in the same way that the young liberal voters are drawn to the counterculture of the Democrat socialism like AOC and Bernie Sanders, the young conservative voters are drawn to the countercultural ideas of Ron Paul, Rand Paul, Thomas Massie, the libertarian Republican type ideas. That's what's exciting to them. That's what gets them involved. That's what turns them out to vote. And come the midterms of 2026, that young group of the Democrats that are less likely to turn out, you got to inspire them to turn out. They're turning out to vote because they want to defeat Trump. They've got the protests, they got everything else going. They got the immigration issues and everything else going for them. They will turn out to take down Trump. We have to turn out the young, especially male voters, to vote Republican again, like we got them to do for Trump, in order to not just hold on to the House majority, but to actually grow it. Grow to the point where somebody like Thomas Massie's no doesn't matter if you're Donald Trump. But in order to grow that majority, you've got to not just keep your coalition, but you've got to turn them out. And let me ask you this question. You have a big, beautiful bill that that is being knocked for not being conservative enough. Like it or not, you go on the podcast and everything else. Even Ben Shapiro will sit there and say, look, this isn't a very good bill. It just isn't. But it's probably the best we're going to get. And Ben Shapiro certainly is not somebody who you'd call, a fanatical libertarian at all, right? Even he's saying that. And so you listen to the podcast and everything else, Theo Vaughn, Joe Rogan, all these people, they're coming on to talk about this piece of legislation. People point to Trump's podcast as, it's funny, they point to his podcast appearances as a key way that he won, but yet they're disregarding that entire crowd of people, the podcast crowd, especially that helps with the young voter. They're disregarding all of them and what their guests are having on and what they're pushing out there. Tim Pool's, for example, what they're pushing out there, they're ignoring that. And they're pushing out there, look, this bill isn't that great. And so if you're going to attack Massie over that, and then attack Massie over not wanting to bomb Iran, when, let's call spade a spade, at least half those podcasts I just mentioned were definitely not super on board with bombing Iran. It wasn't something super important to them. Now, I get it. The older generation especially, I saw a lot of the generation boomer crowd that were like, yeah, let's bomb them. This is good. Let's get it, right? And then there's a lot of younger people that weren't so on board. It was definitely a debate. And so the problem here, and I've seen people try to draw conclusions between like Liz Cheney or Nikki Haley and things to Massie, it's just not accurate because they were hated for being too liberal. The problem here is that Massie sitting there saying, I don't want to bomb Iran, I don't like the big, beautiful bill, is actually something that other conservatives agree with. that the more conservative people agree with. And so you're almost attacking him from the left. It's not like he's out here voting for abortion or to take guns away or something like that. He's just literally saying, look, these aren't good pieces of legislation, or I disagree with this behavior. And for that reason, when you roll out this pack and attack him, it will turn off the young voters across the country that you need to turn out in 2026 in order to grow and to hold the Republican majority in the House. If Trump thinks dealing with Massie's one no vote's difficult, wait till he has a Democrat majority in the House and is impeached 4 more times because of this deep state craziness that's going on, where they've convinced him to not just get involved in this, but to be vocally involved in this race against Massie and this primary against Massie, not realizing, look, this is going to turn off so much of your young voters that you need in 26. This isn't the kind of thing they want to take part in. They feel pushed out. And so if you're sitting here listening to this and you're like, look, but Massie's too inflexible and he's not getting on board and we should just replace him. There's got to be somebody better and blah, blah, blah. I hear what you're saying, but imagine for a second the Democrats attacked AOC, not just locally voters wanted to go after somebody else and maybe some lesser known PACs got involved, but I'm talking about actually like Democrat leadership, like Kamala Harris and not Bernie Sanders, and Chuck Schumer and others actively got involved in campaigning against AOC. What do you think would happen to the Democrat Party? They would lose their young voters. That's the same thing that will happen to the Republican Party, and it will be a bloodbath in 26. In November, Republicans will lose a lot of seats. They just will. And that is what the deep state really wants, because that hamstrings up Trump. And when Democrats and Republicans are locked horns, nothing's getting done. That gives them the ability to now run free range in the bureaucratic messes they've created, and it permanently hampers back McConnell. It permanently hampers back Trump's agenda. And people like McConnell love it. They're salivating. And so, in conclusion, you can disagree with Massie all you want to, and that's fine. You can even vote against him in this next election. That's fine. But this kind of internal fighting coming directly from whether it's House leadership, Trump, etc., on Massie is a bad decision that will result in Republicans and Trump being hamstrung up. And knowing that concern, and I left off last segment talking about how we don't have 10 years when it comes to Big Beautiful Bill. Look, they're not going to pass anything next year because nobody passes anything when they're worried about being reelected. Democrats will grab control of the House. It's a good chance. It's almost guaranteed with what's going on with Massie, in my opinion. Then there's no guarantee that a Republican wins the presidency in 2028. Then you have 8 years of that. Now it's 36. 12 years, 11 years before we have a chance to do anything else. And you cannot pass a law that binds future Congresses. And so if you're the type of person who's really concerned about what's going on with the debt, well, you're going to sit there and you're going to say, look, this is not good. We don't have 10 years, especially with these kinds of decisions being made. We have 1 year and we aren't getting it done. So that's just some viewpoints. And look, as I said, I understand everybody's got their own viewpoints on this. And certainly, it is very reasonable that you would have a viewpoint that Massie's got everything wrong and he needs to go. I just think that we should all be able to agree that a public fight like this, dragging in the president, that risks alienating people across the country, is not a good decision. Well, coming up after this, Nate Morris has jumped into that Senate race. We'll take a look at that after this short break. And you are back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So Nate Morris has finally pulled the trigger. He's jumped into this here Senate race. He went ahead. He actually declared on Donald Trump Jr.'s podcast, Triggered, that he would be running. And then he also has an event later this week, I believe this weekend, 28th, 29th or so, in Shepherdsville, Kentucky, with Charlie Kirk, where it appears Charlie Kirk will be endorsing him. I'm sorry, Monday, June 30th. Looks like Charlie Kirk may be endorsing him. So he may have lined up the Charlie Kirk and the Donald Trump Jr. endorsements. Of course, he's good friend with J.D. Vance. It's very possible J.D. Vance jumps in and endorses him sometime soon. But let's take a listen here to what this sounded like when he went ahead and made his announcement on Triggered. Let's take a listen.
Joining me now, CEO of Morris Industries, Nate Morris. Good to have you back on the show, buddy.
It's great to be with you, Don. Thanks for having me.
Well, first and foremost, I hear you have a little bit of an announcement that we're going to break here tonight.
Absolutely. Well, Don, after careful reflection and prayer, talking to my wife, Jane, I've decided to run for the United States Senate to replace Mitch McConnell here in Kentucky and finally bring this seat back to the people. As I started having these conversations about the United States Senate seat here in Kentucky, everybody said, Don, that this is McConnell's seat, that it belongs to him. And that seat belongs to the people of Kentucky.
All right, there you go. There's him announcing right there. Donald Trump Jr. went on a little bit more. You can check out Triggered on Rumble and listen to the rest of that. This last episode, as far as that goes. Nate Morris is interesting. So as soon as he declares and gets out there, you then have the Cameron campaign launching a pretty interesting, they launched a attack website against Nate Morris called Fake Nate. They called it fakenate.com and kind of went through some of his history as far as being a company and CEO. The attacks there are interesting, of course, when it comes to Nate Morris. That's going to be the attack lines because obviously he doesn't have a voting record, right? You can go after or time in elected office. You've got things you can go after Cameron for time in office. And of course, when you're striking the tone of being against McConnell and this being a referendum on McConnell, Cameron has ties to McConnell, worked in his office. Andy Barr, ties to McConnell. Andy Barr has a voting record you can attack him on. So when it comes to Nate Morris, you kind of got to just attack him on anything historically you can find. And what the Fake Nate website really kind of focuses on is more, it's the kind of behaviors that it focuses on corporate America culture. So, in 2020 and everything else at a time where what's just called spade corporate America was super woke. Nate's company that he founded that's public, has shareholders, stockholders, board and stuff was, doing some pretty wokey things, making woke posts like every other company does. And so obviously Nate's defense, if he publicly talks about it, is going to be, look, I don't really have control over that. It's a board. It's a company being run there. Everybody's kind of doing it as far as it goes. I couldn't stand out there and control it because at that point I had relinquished majority ownership. I'm sure that'll be kind of the defenses against it. And of course the attacks are, look, if you're a CEO of that kind of company and you believed in what you believed in, you would stand up against it and fight against it. And that's going to be an interesting, I think, kind of attack lines to feel out, right? Do you go with politicians with a more established track record that are not always 100% great, or do you go with a new guy who doesn't have a track record as a politician, but you're trying to get people to jump to conclusions about what they believe in based upon prior statements? That'll be kind of the play. How does that go? That'll be interesting to see. Regardless, Nate did also announce with a launching campaign video that, frankly, is pretty good. The campaign video is really good, actually. Let's go ahead. Let's take a listen to that.
It's garbage day in Kentucky. And thanks to Mitch McConnell, things have gotten dirty. The Bluegrass State is sick and tired of cleaning up career politicians' messes. I'm Nate Morris, a Trump America First conservative, and I'm here to take out the trash. I'm a ninth-generation Kentuckian, Born to a single mom on food stamps, raised in a union household. I'm the product of bluegrass grit.
I borrowed 10 grand to start a business, created thousands of jobs.
And took it public, valued at $2 billion, as one of the biggest trash companies in America.
So I know a little bit about garbage. And Mitch McConnell, he's trash Trump.
And for over 40 years, he's been dumping on us.
Amnesty for millions of illegals. Rhino judges in courtrooms across America joining Democrats on gun control. Billions spent on Ukraine and other foreign wars. And trillions more on Biden's massive spending bill. All while becoming one of the richest senators in Washington.
And now he's calling it quits and thinks he can stick us with one of his puppets instead.
My mentor, leader Mitch McConnell, I'm with him because his legacy is big.
Senator Mitch McConnell, and it's been a great privilege and honor to know him, and I'm proud to call him a friend. I'm proud to call him a mentor.
They'll betray President Trump and sell us out. Not on my watch.
We've let the garbage pile up in Washington, D.C. for far too long.
I'm running for Senate to help President Trump clean up the mess. I'm not a politician, and I've never run for office. And I will never stop fighting for the place that made me the man I am today.
I'm Nate Morris. Let's dump career politicians and take out the trash in Washington.
So there you go. There was his launch video. For those who didn't see it, he spent most of the video there on a trash truck, obviously, tying in his background in dealing with trash. You saw his some different talking points. You see that he's going to play with, certainly pushing out the Mitch and calling out the other two for being Mitch McConnellites, as he would, as not just he, but many people would declare it. Like I said, is it a tackling that's going to work? Yes, no, maybe so. You'll have to play that out. Did show the logo. And so I want to say good things and bad things, just being honest, giving commentary as far as it goes. The ad's fantastic. That's absolutely great. The logo, I don't know. I just when I look at that logo, and for those of you who can't see, it says his name. Underneath it says it's time to take out the trash. That's fine to do, but he's got like he's got like what is clearly, I think, meant to be a trash truck next to the name Nate. And there's just something weird about my initial thoughts are like, hey, you probably shouldn't put a trash truck right next to your name in your logo, right? You want to make it clear that the other people are the trash, not you. And so maybe you say he's taking out the trash and don't put a trash truck next to your name. Maybe even throw like Mitch's name in a trash truck and it's driving away or something. I don't know. I if you want to incorporate the trash truck into it, I don't know. But it is it's not the logo I would have went with. I'll say that. But that ad's fantastic. And so just a sandwich of good ideas, I guess, bad ideas, whatever you want to call it. I try to be honest. As I said at the beginning, I'm just trying to be honest here. And I want to say when people do good, people do bad. So Nate, if you're listening, don't take it personal or be offended or anything. And I'm sure the logo won't really matter at the end. But I'm just saying that I would not have made per se that decision when it comes to that. But moving on from the logo itself, the ads I like digging into ads. I think they're really interesting to dig into because you start to see kind of like the difference. So you heard his ad. I'm going to play for you real quick, and this is just funny. I've done it before, but Reason put out this parody video a few years ago of a generic what they call a generic ad, like every political ad ever. I want you to take a listen. I want you to watch this real quick. This is like 2 minutes long. And then we'll go ahead and take a listen to Andy Barr's ad. Let's do that.
Your choice couldn't be more important. Our candidate is in flattering lighting and full bright color. Their candidate is in grainy high contrast black and white, spotted through a telephoto lens from behind a bush, coming back from God only knows where. Our guy points at the horizon and holds a baby. Their guy doesn't have a baby. Their guy has a golf club. The voiceover for our guy is calm, measured, bright. Their guy gets the lower register, and sometimes we slow down. Our Guy has clean headlines and the beautiful lens flare America needs. Here's a scary graph over a photo of their guy awkwardly laughing. Snap zoom. Do you want a snap zoom like that in office? Here's a photo of Our Guy saluting military veterans. Jump cuts, flashes, static, aggressive colors. You can't trust a guy with graphics like this. Our Guy gets stock footage of sunrises and an American flag. Their guy's flag is upside down and on fire. Intercut with overdue bills, war, and a crying baby. Our Guy gets doctors and astronauts and stimulus checks. Flatline, an eagle, hurricane, the Statue of Liberty. Crime scene tape, Ronald Reagan. A girl running in a wheat field to escape a dangerous sexual predator. Welding, atomic bomb. This election, the choice is yours. Their guy or our guy. Inspiring slogan.
So there you go. There's Reason.com's ad there. Their parody ad, of course, making fun of the way political ads are normally done. Nothing like, actually, Nate Morris's ad. Now let's take a listen, though. So you've just heard the parody of what all political ads sound like. Let's take a listen to Andy Barr's ad.
The United States is the greatest country on earth, and it's not even close. But here's the problem. The woke left wants to neuter America, literally.
America was never great!
They hate our values, they hate our history, and goodness knows they hate President Trump. But here in Kentucky, that's why we love him. I'm Andy Barr, and I'm running for Senate to help our president save this great country.
And there you go. So you can see there's actually a stark contrast here where clearly Nate has gone out and has either gotten somebody who's not traditionally does political ads, or he himself, being an outside individual, not really involved with politics, has brought in fresh and good ideas that make an ad really stand out and be awesome. While at the same time, Andy Barr clearly is just going to the same people that always make political ads, to the point where you can literally parody his ad as just being another run-of-the-mill normal political ad, and you really can't do that with Nate Morris's. I think that is worth pointing out. So Nate Morris has jumped in. We'll see if we can't get him on the show here and dig into his platform, dig into what he wants to do. But y'all, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank y'all so much for joining me.